Hi everyone. We spent 2 days with Danny the Digger Herman, a well-known Israel tour guide and archaeologist. In this video, Danny takes us from the Jaffa Gate to the Temple Mount, and he points out many interesting facts along the way.
Good morning, Boker Tov from Jerusalem, Israel. So we are here today about to enter the Jaffa Gate, and we are so lucky to be here with Danny the Digger Herman, an archaeologist and tour guide. So Danny, thank you.
Hello, it's my honor. The old city has 7 gates in total, and the walls are very impressive. What's very important to understand, Lori, these walls are about 500 years old. I know in America, oh my God, it's before the Mayflower. It's really, really ancient, right?
New.
In Jerusalem terms, it's the late Middle Ages. The late Middle Ages. I barely even counted as antiquities. Because beneath it, you have so many more layers, some of it going back to Canaanite times.
The Temple Mount. And
Yeah.
not right now. Right now we're going to go to the Temple Mount. Yeah.
The Temple Mount was the sacred center, but it was taken by the Babylonians. It was taken by the Babylonians. It was then rebuilt when the Jews returned from Babylonian exile. But when they rebuilt it, and especially when Herod decides to renovate it, he goes all the way down to bedrock. So he uproots anything that was there before, at least as far as we can tell.
There is only one entrance to the Temple Mount for non-Muslims. It's very near the entrance to the western wall by the Dung Gate to the Old City. This is the walkway to the entrance, and this is the view from the walkway. Here we are about to enter the Temple Mount. These men have prostrated themselves in prayer before entering because Jews are not allowed to pray past the entrance. Security is provided by Israeli soldiers outside each entrance and by the Muslim Waqf inside the Temple Mount grounds.
But there is apparently some pre-biblical sanctity to the mountain, of which we know very little. What we know more clearly is how David buys out the plot, Solomon then builds there the temple, and that's the place which houses the most sacred item, not just for Judaism, maybe in Western culture, the Ark of the Covenant. It stood there for 300 years until the evil Babylonians showed up and knocked down Jerusalem, took all the spoils of the temple, exiled all the people. The Ark itself is not mentioned. No one knows what happened to it. And when the Jews returned from Babylonian exile, when there was such an opportunity, they rebuilt Jerusalem and they rebuilt the temple and they resettled the land. They don't have the Ark. So ironically, the Holy of Holies of the second temple was left empty. Isn't that bizarre? This is also the image of that temple as Jesus saw it. In the 30s of the first century, he comes here and sees all of this amazing presentation, but he's actually upset. Why is he upset? Because there's one class running the show here called the priests, and they're abusing their power and overcharging the public for the animal sacrifice, for using the purification facilities, for changing the money to the currency you need to use to pay the temple tax. So around the mountain you had money changers providing the service, but guess what? For the lousiest rate on the planet. And this is what Jesus was angry about. So the New Testament records Jesus coming here, but instead of being excited, he's upset, and he turns the tables of the money changers and dove sellers. And he's now actually getting the attention of the public. Wow, here's that rebel. Here's a guy that's finally saying what we all think of. So he's expressing it, but the authorities now do not like him. And it's a fact that a week later the priests will catch him, interrogate him, hand him over to the Romans, and the Roman governor will sentence him to death. 30 years after these, let's say minor events at the time, but pivotal in global history, 30 years later, the Jews are fed up with Roman oppression and they decide to rebel. So the Romans eventually sent a force of 3 legions. They had 28. 3 were enough to crush the Jewish resistance, and in the summer of year 70, knock down here everything. The temple is kaput. Okay? So twice the Jewish temple stood here, and twice it was destroyed. And yet it's not the end of this area or Jerusalem. The city is now very Roman. We don't know exactly what was placed here, but maybe a sculpture of the emperor or a god. But then in the 4th century, all the Romans become good Christians. And now the focal point of the city is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which we shall see later. You can't see it from here, but it's in that direction. And this area is kind of left abandoned. And when Islam shows up, wow, look at all of this area. So sacred in the past. Let's make it sacred again. So they built here the biggest mosque in all of Israel. Okay, many, many buildings. This one is a library, some are schools, some are museums. And of course, the most significant, what we're going to see in a few minutes, the Dome of the Rock. But there's one area, or a few, where bedrock can still be seen. And if you see bedrock, it's level 0. There's nothing beneath bedrock except for caves. So bedrock is a hint for the shape of the mountain in antiquity. And here is one place where you can see it. Unfortunately, there's a bit of garbage, but here the wind is taking it out. And before this stairway was done, you could see more of it. Lori, and the stairway and the bedrock shape here was actually similar to the current stairway, meaning there was a wide flight of steps here. So there was a stairway here also in the days of the temple, is what I'm saying. This little scrap of bedrock was actually quite more visible in the 19th century. There was a wide flight of steps in this bedrock. And this leads many scholars to believe that the Temple Mount in the days of the temple, of the second temple, the one Jesus saw, was kind of similar to what you see today, meaning there was a big plaza on the perimeter, and the temple itself stood on a higher platform in the middle. That meaning also then you had a flight of steps leading to the central raised platform. And that fits with what Josephus tells us. Josephus, a very detailed account of the 1st century, who tells us how the Temple Mount was accessible for all. But the central part was divided, and it had a fence around it with inscriptions in many languages saying, anyone going beyond this point can only be a purified Jew. Let's go up to the raised platform, stand in front of that magnificent shrine, admire this marvelous piece of Muslim architecture, but also try to assess the Jewish past there. So wait, turn around now. Look, we are in between the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock, which is elevated, and behind that flight of a set of arches, which is meant to be weights, a device, a scale, a spiritual scale. It weighs your soul. Are you spiritually worthy of going out? That's also kind of echoing what the Jewish temple may have been, a higher, more sacred zone in the middle. And of course, in the past, Jews would have to purify before going out, full body in a mikveh. Christianity turned it into baptism. John the Baptist really said, you only have to do it once and repent and you're ready for Messiah. That's the whole concept of Messiah, of baptism. And Islam turned around, said, no, you have to do it each time before you go to a holy place, to a mosque, before prayer, but not full body. You see the device? You wash your feet, you wash your ears, you wash your hands. It's a symbolic washing, but it also comes from Judaism again. The whole idea of this purification by water is Jewish in its essence. So do you feel spiritually worthy? I hope so.
Okay.
And Instagram. You haven't visited this site if you didn't Instagram. I'm speechless. This building is magnificent.
come back just to take photos. It's just...
Sure. And this is the entrance today. Technically there are 4 entryways, but today only this one is available. And again, only for Muslims. Before the year 2000 you could, but not in the last 22
I
years.
found my journal and wrote in it that described all the rugs. Oh wait.
And you see that when you go in, you need to take your shoes off. Inside you have a big, like, scarred rock from people chipping pieces off it in antiquity.
Why would they do that?
To take as a holy souvenir. It's very common to take a piece of a holy rock as a holy souvenir. But in the corner of it is one indentation said to be the footprint of Muhammad. That is, of course, clear scientific proof it all happened here because there's a little indentation in the corner. So you understand the process. They found something that matched the narrative and adopted it. What's amazing, Lori, when the Crusaders mastered Jerusalem, why didn't they knock it down? They didn't, because they thought this is, believe it or not, the Jewish temple.
Solomon, I saw they wrote.
So they call it Templum Domini, but then you have the mosque there, so they call it Templum Solomoni. And they had a big golden cross on top, and instead of knocking it down, they made an order to protect it called the Templars, so this is the temple. And this building, believe it or not, was the baptismal place. And you want to see the baptismal font? It's right here. The Muslims didn't trash it, they just turned it again into a trough. Right here.
This is where they would give baptisms?
Yes, look at the shape. It has a cruciform shape. It originally stood inside. It was used for Christians to baptize.
Well, although our time was limited, it was quite an informative tour of the Mount with Danny the Digger Herman. But we actually went back to the Temple Mount on our own on our 8th day in Israel because we felt we didn't spend enough time there. We wanted to see the East Gate from the Mount. It's also called the Golden Gate. So hang in there, this video isn't over. This is the southeastern area of the Temple Mount, and this is the entrance to the El Marwani Mosque. It was dedicated in 1996, and it can accommodate over 6,000 worshippers. The mosque is in an underground space that was called Solomon's Stables since the time of the Crusaders. In 1999, construction began on an emergency exit for the mosque. With no regard for the true history of the Temple Mount, bulldozers dug a large pit, and trucks carried away hundreds of tons of soil, which contained historical artifacts. It's common belief that this was done to destroy Jewish claims to the Mount. The soil that was carted away was reclaimed by Israeli archeologists, who began sifting it in search of historical artifacts. The project is known as the Temple Mount Sifting Project, and it's still in operation today. This is a view of the Golden Gate, or Eastern Gate, from the Temple Mount. In Jewish tradition, the Messiah will enter Jerusalem through this gate, coming from the Mount of Olives. And Christians generally believe that this was the gate through which Jesus entered Jerusalem. The gate was closed by the Muslims in 810, reopened in 1102 by the Crusaders, and was walled again after the Muslims regained Jerusalem in 1187. Ottoman Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent rebuilt the gate together with the city walls, but walled the gate up again in 1541, and it's been walled up ever since. The Ottomans also built a cemetery in front of the gate to prevent a false messiah from entering. This time we left through the northeastern gate of the tribes so that we could walk up to the Mount of Olives, and this is a view of the Golden Gate from the Mount of Olives. Thanks for watching. Please click the like button and consider subscribing. Shalom from Lori and Steve.